do it when you were young. According to science, picking your nose is actually really good for you. And it gets better if you eat your slimy boogers.
Oh, stop it.
They're actually full of good bacteria, which help your teeth.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And that tasty story on Studio 10 was one of many in recent weeks, trumpeting, quote, new research from prestigious universities, including MIT and Harvard, that reveals the incredible benefits of eating your boogers. Or, as the Daily Mail put it,
why picking your nose and eating it may be good for you. Filthy habit could prevent cavities, stomach ulcers, and even HIV.
No more cavities, ulcers and HIV. Remarkable. And it wasn't just the Mail spruiking the story. News.com.au and the Courier Mail also had a version, which was reprinted from The Sun in London, and so did the New York Post, while the UK Independent, the UK Telegraph, the Toronto Sun, and many more had their own versions of the story. So, do the claims stack up? Answer, no. But where to begin? Well, let's start with the Canadian scientist Scott Napper, who, according to news.com.au and the Daily Mail, co-authored this amazing study.
Writing in the journal, co-author Scott Napper, who is a professor of biochemistry at the University of Saskatchewan, Canada, said,
nature pushes us to do different things because it is to our advantage to have certain behaviours. So maybe when you have an urge to pick your nose and eat it, you should just go with nature.
So, what's wrong with that? Well, Scott Napper did say those words, but not in 2017, and not in any scientific journal. He said them to a Saskatchewan radio station, CJME, in 2013. And all Napper's quotes in the latest stories are from that interview, in which he makes it quite clear he has never done any research on boogers and was merely suggesting it might be interesting. We need hardly add, Napper is not the co-author of any new study, and the journal he was not writing in does not, in fact, exist. So, what about scientist number 2?
Austrian lung specialist Professor Friedrich Bischinger, who also helped author the report.
Yes, what did Austria's Professor Bischinger have to say about his new research? Well, he's quoted in just about all the stories saying,
eating the dry remains of what you pull out is a great way of strengthening the body's immune system. Medically, it makes great sense and is a perfectly natural thing to do.
Once again, Bischinger did say those words, but not in 2017. In fact, it was 13 years ago, back in 2004.
Top doc backs picking your nose and eating it,
when they were published on a community website called AnaNova. And once again, all his quotes in the latest stories are taken from there. Professor Bischinger has also done no new study or research on boogers, and according to science journal database PubMed, has never published research on anything. And as for the supposed science behind the claims, there is none, as the Australian Science Channel concludes in this snappy video.
Bottom line, as far as we can tell, there's no science to back up eating boogers. Far more of your own mucus travels down the back of your throat and into your gut than you would ever eat as a snack.
So how did these stupid stories ever get written? Well, thank copycat journalism and our old friend Dr. Google. But it seems they started in Australia with News Corp's KidSpot, which last month reported on a genuine study about how mucus strengthens your teeth. Professor Bischinger and eating your boogers was their embellishment. Then the Daily Mail picked up the story and Dr. Napper was added in. Perhaps after digging out this old yarn from 2013 when Napper first made his comments. You couldn't make it up, could you? Except, of course, they all do. But now, to more serious matters and a self-styled Australian Muslim leader whom some in the media cannot get enough of.
Within seconds, Imam Tawhidi's first visit to the Muslim heartland of Western Sydney was met with abuse.
Thank you.
What does that mean?
It means may God curse you, you pig, you dog.
So who is this man, and why were locals in Sydney's Lakemba so outraged? Well, Mohammed Tawhidi, who describes himself as an Imam of Peace, is tabloid TV's Muslim of choice and a hero to conservatives thanks to comments like this 3 weeks ago on Sky's Outsiders.
If we had politicians like Pauline Hanson in Iraq, my hometown, we wouldn't have had ISIS come in.
Tawhidi, who set up and heads the Islamic Association of South Australia, was propelled to fame last year by Today Tonight as the, quote, Sheikh of Shock, after he called on fellow Muslims to speak out against terrorism.
I'm scared from terrorism as well. Me and my people are the victims of ISIS. Of course I'm scared.
But he caused an even bigger stir when he claimed, again on Today Tonight, that Islamic extremists were planning to set up a caliphate in Australia and rename local streets after murdering Islamists.
It's to create another country or another government within the Australian government. That's what I believe is their agenda, these extreme Muslims.
The chance of that happening? Around about zero. But that didn't stop Tawhidi telling Andrew Bolt how unpleasant the caliphate's punishments would be, especially for Australian Muslims who cheated on their taxes.
They put his head in a pot, they cook it, they eat it, then they rape his wife the same night.
So, was that a cue for the media to stop taking him seriously? Not at all. Despite his outlandish claims, Tawhidi has been built up by the media as a good Muslim, the acceptable face of Islam, making headlines for suggesting that halal certification threatens the Australian way of life, or for supporting Pauline Hanson's call for a ban on Muslim immigration, or for backing Ayaan Hirsi Ali's call to forcibly shut down all Muslim schools and colleges in Australia. Predictably, these pronouncements have made him plenty of enemies and at least as many friends.
Well, what about your response to my interview with Sheikh Mohammed Tawhidi? A massive reaction because he's such a breath of fresh air. He's gone into hiding due to fears that he could be targeted by Islamic extremists, and he's drawn attention for his opinions, which some think are controversial, but really, it's just common sense, isn't it?
Common sense to some, perhaps, but not to most Australian Muslims, who are not extremists, yet want to keep the things they hold dear, like their own schools, their freedom of movement, their own certified food, and their own sacred texts, one of which Tawhidi told Andrew Bolt he wants banned.
The holiest text outside the Quran. You think ditch it?
Ditch it and ban it, and it should be illegal to have this book. Let me read for you.
I'm just wondering, when you go and say things like that, how popular are you in the Muslim community?
I'm not popular at all because they don't like this.
And Tawhidi is particularly unpopular with Sunni Muslims because it's their book that he wants banned. Tawhidi, you see, is a Shia Muslim and traditionally an age-old enemy. Indeed, he told Ben Fordham on 2GB last month that Sunni leaders in Australia...
They just want to live like how Muslims lived in the caves 1,400 years ago.
Tawhidi has also attacked Sunnis on Facebook, calling their sacred texts monkey teachings and describing Sunnis as followers of an alcoholic rapist caliph. Tweets in his name have been even more abusive and obscene, although Tawhidi claims they are fake. Meanwhile, Australia's Imams Council has told One Path Network that Tawhidi is a fake sheikh and not a genuine imam. But the media doesn't seem bothered by all of this because, as Chloe Patton, an expert on Muslim studies, observes, the Sheikh of Shock is just too good to pass up.
I think it's the theatre of it. He dresses up in fancy robes, he says these quite incredible things and presents himself as the insider with special insider knowledge. He appeals to anyone who has a problem with Islam. It basically confirms a lot of conspiracy theories, that Muslims are up to no good and some of the things they hold dear are meaningless.
Now, we're not saying Tawhidi has no right to his opinions, but the media really should not be giving him a megaphone. Nor should they be presenting him as a voice of reason and the Imam of peace when it's clear that some of his views are divisive, offensive, abusive and just plain crazy. And now to our national broadsheet, The Australian, which loves an exclusive and delights in telling us how many it has bagged by filling its front pages with little red stamps, like this one last week.
Exclusive. Henry urges bank tax inquiry.
But just how exclusive was it? Let's take a look at the same day's front page in the Fin Review, as Heath Aston did on Twitter.
Compare the pair. Same splash, but one is exclusive.
So, how well do other examples at The Australian hold up?
Exclusive. Cattle Queen Gina turns focus to China.
Exclusive! Chinese swoop on meatworks could get the chop.
Exclusive. Toxic defence nightmare fells tree changers.
From the outback to the east coast, the Oz has been bringing us some ripper yarns from the regions. So, how did they get around the country to find those stories first? Well, they didn't. This one about toxic chemicals from an RAAF base contaminating groundwater in northern New South Wales was first reported by the Newcastle Herald in 2015. and followed by more than 100 other articles, a special 6-part series, and ultimately a Walkley Award for the Herald, not least because it led to the
Turnbull government promising $55 million to address the contamination crisis.
So, was there anything new in the Australian story? Answer, no. Or not according to the Herald's Michael McGowan, who told MediaWatch,
The Oz front page exclusive contained nothing that the Newcastle Herald hadn't already covered during 9 months of exhaustive reporting.
Pretty emphatic. So, what about this one?
Exclusive! Chinese swoop on meatworks could get the chop.
Answer, no again. Not an exclusive and not the Australians, because the agricultural website Beef Central had broken the story 5 days before.
Is Bindery's $140 million deal with Chinese investor on the rocks?
And last week, the Australian was at it anew with another Beef Central rip-off.
Exclusive! Cattle Queen Gina turns focus to China.
Once again, Beef Central had broken this story 3 days earlier.
Gina hatches plans for massive live export deal with China.
Indeed, both the West Australian and the NT News had followed up that report and credited Beef Central for getting the scoop. But when the Australian ran essentially the same news 3 days later, it not only claimed the story as its own, but slapped on the exclusive stamp. Beef Central claims the Oz has a history of doing this over the years, and its publisher and former Fairfax journo John Condon says he's had a gutful.
It's frustrating when some of the items we break, they grab it and call it an exclusive. It's very unprofessional not to give a small website like us the recognition.
So why does it keep happening? Condon told MediaWatch,
The response from the Oz has been that it's the work of the subs. They've said they interpret an exclusive as an exclusive to the Metro papers. The little guys don't count.
The subs did it was also the excuse last week from the Australian's David Crowe when the Ken Henry exclusive was outed on Twitter.
Apologies. No idea how that ended up on the page. At no point did I say it was exclusive. I knew Laura Tingle had also done an interview.
Well, maybe it's time for a bit more honesty from the people who put the Australian together. But editor John Lehman is adamant none is needed, telling MediaWatch,
The stories all include news-breaking facts obtained from exclusive interviews and reporting. The Australian is proud to strongly promote the original work of our journalists and makes no apology for doing so.
Clearly. But we reckon the subs need a few other stamps to play with, like everyone's got this story, or this one's just a follow-up. And finally tonight, two rare good news for the media industry.
Australia's only newspaper for children has won its battle to keep the presses rolling. Just a few hours ago, Crinkling News was in danger of folding, but thanks to the support of the public, a crowdfunding campaign has raised over $200,000 to keep it alive.
Crinkling News was started a year ago by ex-Fairfax employees Saffron Howden and Remy Bianchi, who are also husband and wife. Using their redundancy checks, they created a website and weekly newspaper with a mission to explain the world to 7 to 14-year-old kids. And it's been a success, with copies delivered to hundreds of classrooms and read by more than 25,000 kids around Australia. But the printing presses, professional journalists and artists that Crinkling News relies on do not come cheap. And it faced certain closure until a successful social media campaign raised $200,000 so it can carry on.
I think it's fantastic that we've been able to show people, and the kids of Australia have shown people, that actually there is a future in newspapers in some way, shape or form.
So why do they do it? One key reason, Howden told the Senate last week, is to increase media literacy and teach kids the difference between fact and fiction.
In order to address the creeping influence of so-called fake news, alternative facts and clickbait, and the selection by social media platforms of the information to which we're all exposed, we need to start educating children at a young age.
We agree, and it's certainly never too early to learn. We wish them well. And you can read more about tonight's stories on our Facebook page or our website, where you can get a transcript, download the programme and read a full response from The Australian. You can also catch up with us on iView and contact me or MediaWatch on Twitter. And don't miss Media Bites every Thursday on Facebook, Twitter and our website, and also on iView. But for now, until next week, that's all from us. Goodbye.